Hallelujah. You can be seated if you can. There was one individual, I won't call Mark's name, but Shepherd John was saying one word, and Mark replied, "Boy, that's going to be a short word today." Just one. Well, I don't think so. How many of you know who the word was? Wasn't he one word, the only word? And that one word encompasses all the DNA strings of Elohim and all of creation. And I got to thinking about that while I was working on this message. And I'm thinking, we have a tendency to pick and choose which word we're going to either believe or not believe. And if we really believe that the Word was made flesh, He's the embodiment of all of Elohim's words just inside this vessel, then what part of His body are you wanting to get rid of? What part of the body of Messiah are you willing to denigrate, cast out, throw away, diminish? And I got to thinking about that. If that's really the truth, and He was the walking embodiment of all of creation's word inside a vessel, and we're told that we also comprise the body of Messiah, do you think that maybe if we decide there's a part of the body that we don't want, we might be cutting our own self off of the body? That's a sobering thing. That's a sobering thing. In particular, when it has to do with stuff that you may not be familiar with. Maybe it's some of your traditions, and some of your traditions get their fur rubbed backwards when you hear something from a different perspective. And I was sharing, Brenda and I were in a facility just a couple of days ago, and there was a gentleman brought up a subject, and I said, listen, wait a second. You don't have to be afraid of having what you believe challenged. Listen to me. Truth will stand scrutiny. If you're afraid for your closely held beliefs and traditions to be challenged, and if you get angry and belligerent when they are challenged, then I have to ask whether or not you really are convinced that what you believe is the truth or not. Because truth will stand a challenge. And I'm sharing this with you because I'm going to broach a subject in this particular teaching that a lot of people get uncomfortable with. We're going to talk about the signs in the stellar heavens. Some people call them the zodiac. Some people say, oh, you're delving over into astrology. Astrology is the worship of those stellar luminaries, and we don't fool with that because that has a pagan bent to it. We do believe with everything in us that Father wrote the message of creation in the stellar luminaries long before He ever made that word flesh and put it in this earth. In fact, Moshe says it on more than one occasion, let heaven and earth stand as a witness against you. Everything is established in the mouth of at least two witnesses. And I'm here to tell you this afternoon that there are some things that are heading our direction. That as the body of Messiah, if we don't understand the plans that He has for us, and when we're supposed to move when He says move, and when we're supposed to stay where He sends us, rather than when we get our feelings hurt or get offended or get challenged, then I'm letting you in on a secret. Abba wrote the message in the luminaries before the foundation of the world was ever settled. Just because the enemy has taken those stellar luminaries and massaged the message, you get offended because you look in the heavens and it's got a Greek name or a Roman name attached to it, but yet you'll still pick up a King James Bible or some of these other translations, if you will, that have been completely massaged at the whim of whomever it was that translated to fit their own personal agenda, and yet we have a problem with the message written in the stellar luminaries. Come on now. Come on, we're not babies anymore. Some of you have been in this thing long enough that you ought to be able to have a good solid foundation, and many of you have been challenged out of your comfort zone, and I promise you, you're going to hear some things today that will probably shake you a little bit. Turn to your neighbor and tell them, There's a whole lot of shaking going on. I want the things that can be shaken in me shaken off and shaken out so that there's nothing that remains except the truth of Yahweh's word. And that's why I believe this parsha right here, Devarim, it launches us into the mind of Yahweh. And it's literally taking everything that has been shared by Moshe from Genesis all the way up to this particular time. It's literally everything that creation has to say about the house of Israel condensed into this one book. And I'm telling you, if you ever studied this, and if you're ever one of those individuals that has an opportunity to teach Devarim, this is a difficult parsha. The whole book's difficult. Why? Because our ways and our thoughts are not his. His ways and his thoughts are higher than ours. And so you have to get into the mind of Messiah in order to take and extract the things that he has for you as an individual and collectively as a body of Messiah. I don't know if I can have the mind of Christ. Well, wow, isn't it in Philippians when he says, let this mind be in you, which was also in Messiah Yeshua. Turn to your neighbor and tell him, I have the mind of Messiah. All right, well, stop giving a piece of it away every time you get an opportunity. Let's look at this Torah portion, Devarim, Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 1 through chapter 3, verse 22, and it is a pleasure to welcome Ceci in the house. We've missed you, Ceci. We'll get an offering from you in a few minutes. As I said in my notes, this Torah portion is so convoluted. There's some things in here that have challenged the scholars or rabbinic sages for generations. They're mind-numbing questions that to this day are unanswered. It addresses a lot of key elements regarding Israel's past after they having left Egypt. They've been wandering around now for 40 years, and it looks as if the summation of that exercise in futility called the wilderness journey is about to take place. Moshe is finishing his final dissertation. I believe that he already knew what was about to transpire with his own personal life. I also believe that he had conveyed that same message probably to Joshua and Caleb, and more than likely the other heads of the house of Israel, and the people probably understood that they were being privileged to hear the final word of the messenger of Elohim that had been sent as the deliverer for the house of Israel. It looks into some things that was transpiring regarding why Moshe is denied entrance into the promised land. Listen to me. Regardless of what your personal opinion here is, in fact, there's actually two different reasons that's given. One, and this parsha says that he struck the rock. Many people believe that because he strikes the rock that he's denied entrance. But if you go back and look, back in Parsha Chukat in the book of Numbers, it says that he's denied entrance because of the sin of the spies. We're not here to really find out that particular answer. What we're going to attempt to do is to show you some parallels in what Moshe is sharing at the end of the age. Did you hear that? For the house of Israel. It's at the end of an age, but it's at the beginning of a new generation. And this is something that we have lost. And I really appreciate Shepherd John and his lovely bride because they have helped to teach us how to become more forward thinking because of some things that Abba's deposited in them and the ministry that he's challenged them with and trusted them with. How to think generationally. And the church has lost that. We've tried to focus on numbers, filling up a house with numbers. And if you go back and study statistics, the statistics say that when you regard numbers of people that have, quote unquote, made a salvation commitment, 1 year later, 95% are back where they were or else worse. So what we've lost is the idea of creating disciples, bringing up disciples, teaching disciples how to teach the next generation. And this is what Moshe is doing right here. Another thing that we're shown, and most of the times we miss it, is some logistical information. Where are they when Moshe gives this dissertation? This dissertation lasts for 37 days. Where were they? We're told here. It actually begins by giving us the place where Moshe's final talk, and he shares these things. He goes back and reiterates, reemphasizes. Why would he want to reiterate something? We know that the entire generation has already died off except for Joshua, Caleb, Moshe, and Aaron. He's about to transpire. Miriam's about to go. But he's reemphasizing it for this next generation to put them in remembrance of the commitment that Yahweh had made to them as a people, as a nation. You can go to war with a promise that Yahweh has made you. And he's sharing these things with them. He's giving them some prophetic insights, some parallels that are going to be shared with the children of Israel. They were familiar with the message that had already been written in the stellar heavens. They had had this passed down orally to them for generations, and now they're about to cross over this line in the sand, this place called the Jordan River, into the promised land and access their inheritance. And it seems as if this was just status quo, just an ordinary day in the life of a wilderness journey. I submit to you that everything that's being shared right here, you could take it, and if we were to go back to the old machines that we used to have back in the day, what do you call those? The overhead projectors, when you had the little film, and you put that film up there, and then you cast that film like you see up there on the screen. What you're reading here in this book called Devarim, you could literally take it and overlay it over the life that you and I are living right now in anticipation of accessing our inheritance, accessing the promised land. And you can see that these are shadow pictures and parallels that if you will stop long enough to set aside your tradition and go back and look at what Abba's trying to say, you will not spend 40 years like your previous generation did in the wilderness and your flesh rot and die off. Okay? In fact, the Torah portion here tells us that they were in the vicinity of Mount Horeb, only an 11-day journey from the promised land. They had literally come full circle. Let me remind you that the Hebraic mindset is cyclical. It's not linear. It's cyclical. It goes around and around and around in a circle. The luminaries are in a cyclical motion. And so you find the children of Israel right here, only 11 days from the promised land. 40 years it took them to get back to where they had started from originally. Listen to me. I challenge you today. Some of the things that you have been taught by your forebears, some of the things that have been grandfathered down to us, some of the traditions that we hold close to our bosom, and we believe that they are the foundation of our life, Yahweh has turned around and allowed your circumstance to bring you full circle so that your foundation can be challenged again. So that you can find out if you're capable of standing on that word. Is it the rock or is it sand? What are you standing on? Is what you're standing on capable of getting you into the promised land? Listen to me, this is not going to be a cakewalk either. And if you go back and study what transpires from here as the mantle is passed over to Joshua and Caleb and the things that transpire after they get into the land of Canaan, you'll find out that Yahweh had begun to fulfill his promise to Abraham all the way back from that day forward. And now the children of Israel are about to see their inheritance, and the price of accessing your inheritance is going to cost you dearly. Come on now. I'm telling you, this is a powerful word. Let's look at Devarim. We want to look at the root word of it. Brittany touched on it last week and did a powerful job. It comes from the root Devar, Strong's number 1697, and it's translated as meaning a speech, a word, but it can also, this blew my mind. I don't know why I'd never paid attention to this before. It could also indicate a case, as in case law, as in a precedent that was set before the foundation of the world. And if I am being contested in the court of creation, and I have the Devar, the Devarim of Yahweh, I already have a precedent that has been established in creation's courtroom. And listen to me, you cannot obfuscate precedent or case law. I don't care what kind of judge you may have. I don't care if he's against the Torah or not. The case law is settled. Are you hearing me? It means to set something in a row, to arrange it in a specific order, much like a shepherd. And y'all wonder sometimes why we're constantly going around as shepherds like we're herding cats. It's because our gift is to help you keep within the case law. You know, because if you stay inside the parameters of case law, come on, you're going to win this argument that the devil may have against you. Say amen. It's when you step outside the bounds of the case law. It's when you get outside the flock. Say amen. That's why there's so many people that say, I want to come hang my hat with you. And when they get here, they get, ooh, it's hard to stay inside a place where the enemy knows if he attacks, he's got a shepherd that's going to come and do business. But that's okay. Until that same shepherd has to call you to task and say, listen, you know, I saw where you got outside the boundaries. You need to come back in here. You need to stop acting like a goat inside this sheepfold. And I'm going to tell you something. If you go back and study ancient history, even today in the Near East, they'll put a jackass inside the sheepfold to help take care of defending the flock, because most sheep and goats can't take care of their business. Now you know what I've been called to. Say amen. The word Devar, I know y'all laughing. The word Devar can also indicate, because this is the positive and the negative side of the Hebrew language, it can indicate laying snares and plotting against someone. I honestly believe right here in this Torah portion that there's some snares being laid by Moshe. And there's a plot being established by Moshe. Against whom? Who are the snares being laid? See, if you just read it in the King James English or any other translation, if you don't go back and look at the Hebrew, you will never find these things that are hidden. And if the Devar is also a case law, it can accuse or exonerate at the same time. It seems to me that Moshe is setting the house of Israel in order for something powerful. And if that's the case, listen to me carefully. You're hearing this teaching this afternoon because he is attempting Moshe, who is the author of the Torah. And so it's literally not so much Moshe as it was what Moshe was charged with handling. That word is attempting to help set some things in order in your life to get you prepared for what's heading your direction and where he's trying to take you. Stop trying to move unless Abba says it's time to go. Now, the word here, this Devarim, speaks plainly of Messiah and everything that has to do with his redemptive work. And without that knowledge, you cannot come to the Father. In fact, Yeshua, describing the word himself, he makes this declaration, I am the way. Did you hear that? I'm the way. And then it goes on to break it down even simpler for people like me. He says, no man can come to the Father except by me. In other words, I am the door. And so if that's the case, then I need to understand a little bit more about this door, because I cannot access the Father without going through Messiah Yeshua. Does that mean say? Now, it's also important because Moshe is indicating that the Devar has both a heavenly and an earthly presence. Because he says, I call heaven and earth both to witness or to testify either for you or against you. And so it's not an accident that the heavenly witnesses that we would like to call the zodiacal constellations, you can call them the Mazaroth, that's a better Hebrew word, it's actually translated as the way. And so when Yeshua says, I am the way, he's literally saying, I'm the Torah, I'm the Word, I'm the only vehicle that'll gain you access to the Father. But he's also speaking of the ancient word way from the Mazaroth that had been set in the heavens from eons past. I am that. When you see that, if you can understand that, even if you don't understand what's written, that's me. It's testifying of me. That's mind-staggering. The Devar, the Devarim, is literally the DNA of Yahweh himself that was deposited into the living man known as Yeshua. And so if we decide we're going to pick and choose what we want to believe or not believe, then it's actually an attempt on our part to denounce him as being a hybridized entity. He's impure or he's malformed in some way, because I am the way. But I don't want to believe that way. So we need to be careful We need to make sure that whatever we hold fast to our heart, that we can go back and substantiate it in Yahweh's word and hear him clearly. Yeshua said, the most important thing is to hear, and to hear correctly. Now you know why Yahweh gave you one mouth and two ears. Some of you feel like you've got two mouths and no ears. Hello? That's painful, isn't it? But it's the truth. I'm going to show you why throughout the New Testament, Yeshua is called Yeshua ben Nazareth, the Nazarene. If you go back and study history, and I challenge you, don't just take my word for this. Go back and do what 2 Timothy 2:15 says. Study to show for yourself, so that you can not be a workman that's ashamed. Go back and do this research. There is no known record of a place, city, or a town called Nazareth. No proof of its existence has ever been found. And so if he's called Yeshua ben Nazareth, Yeshua the Nazarene, Yeshua from Nazareth, then you need to stop and go back and say, if that place never existed, then what's it talking about here? In fact, there are scholars that are a lot more profound than what I am. One of those is Gesenius and Fuerst, and both of them say, and a lot of others beside those two, but these are two prominent individuals. They believe that Yeshua the Nazarene could just as easily have read Yeshua the Mazarot, because the root of both words are the same, Nazar. And the mim in Hebrew and the in nun are interchangeable. And it's interesting because the root of that word Nazar or Mazarot means to encircle, a cyclical, non-linear way or road. Did you hear that? And so when he is identified as Yeshua the Nazarene, it's literally saying Yeshua the way. He is the way. What way is he? He is the way that was written there. And what was written in the earth in the form of what we call the Torah now became a mobile witness, if you will, of a fixed witness in the stellar luminaries. That just blows my mind. And so if we're not careful, we will fall prey to the devices of the enemy, because the sole purpose of the enemy for the last number of eons has been to distort the message of the stellar heavens. So, I'd like to begin looking right here in this Torah portion at the specific time that this dissertation, if you will, sometimes my mind moves faster than my mouth. Say amen. Some of y'all, you have that same problem. Your mouth moves a lot faster than your mind can keep up. Come on now. I want to look right here at when this passage is written. It takes place in the 11th month, called Shabbat, based on the Hebrew reckoning. And it lasts 37 days, with Moshe dying in the 12th month on Adar 7. Now, the text doesn't give you some explicit dates for his death, but it's easy to calculate, and you can find it in a number of different places. I didn't have time to give you the reference today, so there's you some homework. But it shares that there are 30 days of mourning, 3 days of waiting for the children of Israel to cross, and finally they cross over into the promised land on Nisan 14, which was Passover. Now, what's interesting is because when you look at the narrative of this particular Torah portion, you'll find that the timing of this event in Shabbat occurs during the month of Aquarius. Shabbat and Aquarius are associated together. If you go back and study the Torah, you'll find every one of the 12 tribes of Israel was assigned with or associated with one of the stellar constellations, one of the houses in the stellar luminaries. You got me? Okay. And it's noteworthy because Yeshua dies on the same day, Adar 7, 120 years after he was born on the same day, Adar 7. These things are not accident. If you go back and study the birth and the death of a lot of the patriarchs that are mentioned in the Torah, you find that they're born and they die on some very powerful and specific times on Yahweh's calendar. That's why I don't get too upset when I hear some things that's happening in the secular world based on the Roman or Gregorian calendar, because the enemy has a tendency to kind of contrive things and manipulate things according to their plans. I want to look and see what Yahweh's calendar says. Are you hear me? That's what and so if the enemy says that there's something going to happen in September 11, you need to be careful. There's some foreboding signs. Listen, let's see what Abba's word has to say. Let's see what his word has to say. If September 11 happens to be on the Day of Atonement, I'm saying, maybe we need to check this out. If it happens to fall on the day of Yom Teruah, the Feast of Trumpets, then I would say, well, now let's see. Yes, the rapture, hallelujah. Oh, Shepherd, Brother John got me excited there. This is pretty powerful. The word Shabbat is defined as a rod or a staff, and it's found in Zechariah 1, verse 7. It has a numeric value of 311, which is the same as the Hebrew word for man, ish. That's interesting because Shabbat, as I said, occurs during the constellational sign of Aquarius, the water bearer, and the sign of Aquarius is the only one of the 12 constellational signs that takes on the form of an ish, a man. Strictly an accident. And it is also, in my opinion, very apropos because the name Moshe, the one that was put in a basket in the bulrushes, placed in the water and taken out of the water, his name in the Hebrew literally indicates, it could be read both ways, the one that's drawn out of the water or the one from whom water is drawn. Look, wait a minute now. Aquarius, the water bearer, the sign of Aquarius. He is drawn out of the sign of the one bearing water. And if he's drawn out of that sign, it literally indicates that he becomes a vessel or a source of living water himself, and so you could draw water out of him. Now, you go back and look at Yeshua, the Messiah, who was prophesied as a well or a water source. And so I contend that the sign of this month is prophesying not only of the coming birth and death of Moshe, and that these signs would also fulfill the shadow picture of the birth and death and subsequent resurrection of our Messiah as well. Can you say amen? You don't have to if you don't agree. I'm going to give you a whole pile of information, and you can make your own decision, but I believe that it's going to be hard to challenge this. It should also be mentioned that both Shabbat and Adar are mentioned in Zechariah and Esther, respectively. And it's interesting because Zechariah and Esther were both contemporary with Daniel. And Daniel, listen to me carefully. Daniel is a prophet to the nations in the last day. What day is that? Wow. There was a song when I was a teenager called, "It's the Dawning of the Age of Aquarius." Even the unregenerated, secular, pagan entities out there know more about the message prophetically that's being released than the vast majority of Christians in today's believing community do. And it's interesting because right now we are still inside the last vestiges of the sign of Pisces at present. And some people will even go so far to say that Aquarius actually started March the 21st in 2021. And it's also interesting because if we have crossed over the threshold and we have moved into the sign of Aquarius, this is interesting. This is mind-staggering. I didn't just pick this out. This is Yahweh that has this information out there. Aquarius is the sign that is said to govern mass communication. What generation has ever lived with the ability to mass communicate aside from this one? And I said here in my notes, let that sink in when you look at the eternal international sign of communication. You can communicate worldwide in some of the most remote. I was thinking about that the other day. How do some of these quote unquote third world countries have a presence on the internet? I get messages from them all the time, and I'm thinking, my goodness, somebody had to help them get that $1,000 cell phone. Are you hearing me? $1,000 would probably be a year's wages in some of these places. And I'm not trying to be facetious. I'm just trying to tell you that the powers that be have helped to put these things in people's hands around the world for one express purpose, and that is to be able to communicate. And this is not an accident, because Daniel foretold this. He reminds us of a future time when there would be a conglomeration of a 10-toes kingdom that would arise, whose inhabitants would be part iron, immortal, and part miry clay, mortal. And I believe that it would be a clear reference to a future, let me just back up and retract that, present and intensified future commingling of the serpent seed being known as the Nephilim or the Devarim, that Moshe is also warning about in this prophetic rehearsal. Did you notice that? When you were studying this, did you notice that Moshe is actually warning the children of Israel about the Nephilim? No, you didn't, unless you looked into the Hebrew language. By the way, that word Gibor, it has a numeric value of 205, the same as the Hebrew word for the month of Adar. And so I have a parenthetical phrase inserted here for you if you have my notes. It says, could the handheld, listen to me carefully, could this handheld cell phone be a precursor, since it's created from diodes and chips, of what is going to be soon inserted into the body, where you can both send and receive and view messages? It is already an established fact. I did the research. This stuff was being talked about in the early 2000s, where they would have the ability to implant stuff not only in your body, your hands, but in your brain as well, so that you could communicate almost subliminally one with another. Hold on now. Artificial intelligence, because that's what that cell phone is. It's an artificial intelligence, and I'm just using that today as a teaching tool, but there's a computer setting here, and there's also everything that you can imagine in our homes, from the smart meters on the outside where your electricity comes into the house, to these smart TVs, to all these other kinds of things. The artificial intelligence becomes that iron, or that immortal, that is being planted inside the miry clay. Listen to me. You need to learn how to qualify what you're hearing and seeing and what you're accepting. Now let's go back to looking at this study. We also have looked at how Moshe strikes the well or the rock the second time, out of which he was supposed to draw water for Israel, and subsequently, as I was just alluding to earlier, according to many, he's denied entrance into the promised land. And so, if you can kind of keep that on the side of the burner here and continue to look at the names in these Hebrew months, the month Adar, I want to look at it for a second. It's translated as meaning glorious, but it also can indicate to expand, to be wide, to swell out, as in the belly swelled, indicating that this particular month is impregnated, it's pregnant, and it's about to give birth. It's about to release something, which leads you into Nisan, the month when there is a new birth opportunity for resurrection. Adar is mentioned in the book of Esther, and it's connected to listen, this is powerful. It's connected to the zodiacal sign of Pisces, where two fish are found interconnected. Now, bear in mind, this is the 12th month just before Passover, which I said falls on the 14th of Nisan, in the first month under the sign of Aries, also known as Tele, or the ram in Hebrew. Tele, or the ram, is associated with Yehuda. Yeshua from the tribe of Yehuda. So it leads me to believe that if there's anything written regarding Tele, the ram, or Aries, the ram, then I need to study that sign, because it says that Yeshua is associated with that constellational sign. Now backtrack just a little bit, and I want to remind you once again that Moshe was both born and died during this 12th month. Listen, these numbers are staggering. At the age of 120. I don't believe it's a coincidence. In fact, if you saw that age 120, it should carry you all the way back to Genesis chapter 6, verse 3, when Yahweh says, listen, I am not going to always strive with man, For yet, though he is flesh, his days will be 120 years. How many of you remember that? And if you go back and study Genesis chapter 6, verse 3, that's kind of just all of a sudden inserted into that passage in between him talking about the sons of God coming into the daughters of men, talking about the Nephilim coming in and cohabitating with the daughters of men and producing a monstrous race on the earth, which was a prelude, if you will, to the flood. And so there's something going on here with this number 120 and the insertion of the Nephilim seed into the earth, okay? Now go back and look at Genesis chapter 6, verse 3. Specifically where you find the phrase, yet his day shall be. That is summed up in one Hebraic phrase, beshagam, and it's translated out of the root gam, which means moreover, also, etc. And the numeric value, this is, you think that sometimes we sit, I'll be honest with you, this takes a lot of time to put it together, a lot of time. But I don't have the time to just go hunt for stuff to put in there. Oh, this will fit in here. Oh, this will be good. Brother John, you got a nugget over here. I don't have time for that. And so when I run across this stuff, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, who put this here? Who put this here? The numeric value of that phrase, beshagam, is 345, the same as the Hebrew word Moshe. And so when you read this, yet his days shall be, it could actually be rendered this way. Moreover, gam, Moshe's days shall be 120 years. Isn't that odd? Because that's exactly how long he lived. And so when you look at this, it looks as if it's just a minuscule connection. You just kind of, I don't know if I can put those things together. It's kind of like you're weaving stuff, you're knitting stuff together. I don't know if this particular stitch would fit with this one. And this, you got to take this one. And that's what we do a lot of times. I've never seen that stitch before, so let me just get this one out. But it seems as if there's a connection to the fallen ones and their seed being inserted into the womb of the daughters of men here in Genesis chapter 6. And this, albeit fleeting, hidden reference to Moshe. So I had to ask myself, what is this it's trying to be communicated here? I ask these kind of things. And I run these little trails and to see where it ends up. And vast majority of time, I follow this trail. Remember, it's cyclical, and I think I'm going this way, and I'll never return. Some of y'all probably think that when I get up to speak, you'll never get to the end of it. But it's like you go in full circle, and it takes you right back to what Abba's been showing you, and you go back, and that's exactly what Brittany was pointing at. And when Shepherd John gets up, he picks this thing up, and he's carrying. I'm thinking, my goodness, this is a lot bigger than our intellect. Are you hearing me? Could this be a warning that these final words, the Devarim of Moshe, are somehow pointing to some events in the days that we're living in, wherein these same Nephilim or fallen beings are going to attempt to insert their seed into the earth and get cut off once again? Is it possible that the Torah was intended to be a blueprint of Yahweh's DNA? Presented in both the heavens and the earth as an eternal witness against any seed or word that would attempt to usurp its authority? Let me just ask you this. How many of you seen in your lifetime more than one biblical translation? Let me see your hand. Come on. Some of you probably never seen one. Well, the King James, that's what Jesus carried with him. I don't understand that. He carried a King James. King James wasn't born then. My point is, those translations, regardless, I don't care how pure the heart of King James could have been assumed to have been, which it wasn't. It's been massaged to some, and all you have to do today is pick up one of these Message Bibles. Yeah. Manna was nothing but buttered popcorn, by the way. Smell that. That's buttered toast. My point is that all of those have the ability to have been massaged throughout the centuries, But you cannot change the message that was written in the stellar luminaries. They were written by the finger of Yahweh. Go back and read Psalm 19, and you'll find that the glory of Yah was declared in the stellar heavens, and the firmament became the work of his hands. Now, I don't care what people have tried to say about it. That's an indelible message that cannot be changed. My goodness. Is it possible? Now, this is just, we're talking about Moshe and the fact that Moshe struck the rock. Moshe's denied access to the promised land. Just think about this for a second. Is it possible that Moshe saw this second attempt at the resurrection of the Nephilim seed? And is it possible that he understood that there would be an attempt in the future where they would try to counterfeit the living water, the seed of Yahweh, and thus he strikes the rock, acting out their destruction rather than allowing Yahweh's plans to come to fruition? Just for argument's sake. Look at this 120 Yovel or Jubilee cycle. It's a period of 6,000 years. If you go back and look at it, a Yovel being 50, 120 times 50. And so if that's the truth, then the outcasts that are being gathered right now for this greater exodus, they're being gathered as we enter into, we're right here at the boundary line, about to cross over. Listen, you can see into the promised land. I don't think we got an 11 days journey. Are you listening to me? Some of y'all may take 40 years. This 11 days or shorter for us. Are you? And so right here, the greater exodus is taking place at the culmination of this 12th sign of Pisces. Did you know that the sign of Pisces, this is another thing that blows my mind. The sign of Pisces is said to be the sign that opens up one's eyes to the origin of creation, helping you to find ultimate salvation. Now, even the pagans understand that. Isn't that interesting? How many of you remember when Moshe struck the rock the first time? You know what happened to that rock? All you have to do is go and look at split rock research with Jim and Penny Caldwell. That rock split. And I thought, isn't that interesting? Because the Jordan River is about to be struck and split. The sign of Pisces, for those of you that need some more information, is this. Again, how many of you came up through this 70s and 80s and 90s? How about the prophetic restoration? I didn't say pathetic. I don't know where you came from. I'm talking prophetic, as in the restoration of the prophet. Now it's the apostle. But the sign of Pisces is associated with dreams and visions and prophecy. And so even those that follow the New Age movement of some of these fringe esoteric religions, they understand that we are, yes, indeed, at the dawning of the age of Aquarius, and as such, Aquarius is the only man figure in the zodiac known as the water bearer and also as the gatekeeper with the same eternal message. It opens the doorway to Nisan, Aries, and the coming of the Lamb that was slain before the foundation of the world. By the way, the word lamb in Hebrew, zeh, has a numeric value of 12. Isn't that odd? And all these numbers just like this. If you hunted for it, I promise you, if you hunted for this, you couldn't find it. And let me just share this with you. The constellational sign of Aquarius, each monthly sign, has a prevalent or predominant planet associated with it. And in this instance, the planet that's associated with the sign of Aquarius is Uranus, and it seems, if you go back and study it, that this particular planet represents the condition of the believing community in the last days regarding megathalipsis, or great tribulation, because it is the coldest and the most dim planet. Did you hear what I just said? I'm convinced that though this generation that's being raised up right now and that are entering into the sign of Aquarius, that are calling themselves believers and thumping their chest, the vast majority, according to statistics in Yahweh's word, go back and read the parable of the sower, and you can challenge it. Don't challenge me. I'm convinced that it's talking about a group of individuals whose light is so dim that there's going to be the potential for a great falling away to come. You can't fall away from something if you had never been close. Are you listening to me? Now, the sun shines on the south pole of this planet Uranus for 42 years and then changes and shines on the north pole for 42 years. And it is said that this cold condition in this planet is called a heart of stone. And Ezekiel prophesies in this new generation. He says, a new heart also will I give you, and a new spirit will I put within you, and I will take away the stony heart out of your flesh, and I will give you a heart of flesh. And it's interesting because this same planet, even the New Agers understand this. This same planet speaks prophetically of the fall of the Titans. We understand them as the Nephilim or the Devarim in the Greek mythology. Isn't that amazing? Let's continue to look a little bit further at this number 120, especially regarding the insertion of the Nephilim seed into the earth. 120 is the value of several words that are found in your Strong's Concordance from number 45, 37 through 39. And each one of them has the mem, samic, kaf root, masak, mesek. And it means to mix, mingle, to be fully mixed, a covering, a screen, a curtain, something in secret, something covered in secret, something hidden, but it's also the root of the word mask. Oh. Now, have you ever wondered why they came up with this asinine thing that everybody was supposed to be isolated by wearing a mask when there is empirical evidence that proved that the mask do not work? Have you ever, how many of you just ever start to ask those kind of questions? Is it possible that they had something planned and that it relates to the hidden living nanoparticles that were found inside nasal swabs and intertwined inside surgical masks, that when you inhaled or deliberately had them inserted, you literally became a waiting host? Oh, wait a minute. Iron mixed with miry clay. Let me just ask you this. Have you ever asked yourself, why were they just giving them away? You could go anywhere and people just hand you a mask, hand you a mask. Have you ever went to a pharmacy and tried to buy them? They gave away multiplied millions of dollars just in these masks and nasal swabs. Have you ever wondered why? Come on. Well, I'm telling you that the truth is found in the stellar luminaries. While we were looking at these aforementioned zodiacal signs, and I promise you, a lot of people will just shake them off and say they're irrelevant. But in my opinion, it's uncannily connected to a statement made by Yeshua in Mark chapter 14 and in Luke 22, just before he is going to suffer and be executed. Yeshua makes this statement. He has his disciples come to him and they're questioning him about the Passover, and he sends two men, two representing Pisces, the house called the house of fish. And these two men are instructed to go look for a man bearing a pitcher of water. Wait a second. If you go back and study Hebraic culture, men never carried the water. You ladies now know why the backbone of most congregation are women, because y'all carry the water. Say amen. Some of these men all say, oh, me. They're told to go back and look for a man bearing a pitcher of water so that they could celebrate Pesach during Aries. You see that parallel here? Yeshua, who was a rock, the Melchizedek rock, he is the same rock that followed Israel in the wilderness. Listen to me. He's being set up because this same rock that followed them in the wilderness is about to be struck again for the second time by the same house of Levi that Moshe came from. Oh, it ain't so? Go back and look at Caiaphas. I'm telling you, There's some parallels and shadow pictures here that are striking, no pun intended. It ought to be a sobering thought for our generation, because if Moshe did strike that rock acting out some kind of a prophetic rehearsal, then you and I need to understand that we are part of the body of Messiah. Am I right? And if that same parallel or shadow picture is still being set in motion, I contend and I submit this to you, I prophesy this, that the body of Messiah is going to be struck again in the days in front of you. Turn to your neighbor and ask them, can you stand the striking? Most believe that this is why Moshe's denied entrance to the promised land. How many of you have ever heard that? Well, the reason they say that is because the first time he strikes a rock, it's emblematic of the crucifixion. Well, then he strikes it the second time. He's only supposed to speak to it when he strikes it the second time. Well, he just crucified our Messiah for the second time. Crucified him again. But then you overlook Hebrews chapter 6, verse 4 through 6, and so you have to now give me an answer for this. For it is impossible for those who were once enlightened and have tasted of the heavenly gift and were made partakers of the Holy Spirit and have tasted of the good word of Yahweh. I don't know if Moshe would fit into there or not. And the powers of the world to come. Moshe was one of those notable miracle workers. If they shall fall away, to renew them again unto repentance, seeing they crucify to themselves the Son of Yahweh afresh and put him to an open shame. That's the same thing that people say Moshe was guilty of. It's in here. It's in here. And so if that's true, and again, many people consider the second striking of the rock to represent a re-crucifying of Yeshua, then Moshe would seem to fall into that category. But yet he is seen on the Mount of Transfiguration and referred to numerous times throughout the Tanakh and the New Testament. Hold on here, let me ask you something. How many of you have ever considered the fact that a lot of times people are, quote unquote, visited by relatives, expired relatives, and expired dead friends, right? And they get so emotionally distraught because they think those dead friends and dead relatives have been sent back to. I've got news for you. There's a line of demarcation. You were talking with or being messaged to by a familiar spirit. No one who has died comes back. And no one would carry on a conversation. Is that right? Well, then how in the world can you explain Moshe and Elijah and Yeshua and those disciples on the Mount of Transfiguration? Who was that? Oh, pinned you up in a corner with that one, didn't we? Moshe's dead. Well, if Moshe's dead, then how was Yeshua carrying on a conversation with him at the Mount of Transfiguration? Hello? Have you ever asked that question? So what's going on here? Was not being allowed into the promised land an eternal banishment for Moshe? What really happened? Do you think maybe there's a message here in Moshe's actions that give you some clue? I believe that it's my opinion, that Moshe's behavior was prophetic, and it was a rehearsal of what Israel as a nation would later do to their Messiah. In other words, they would strike him the second time. And in fact, Moshe's life was a living example of Yeshua. For example, Moshe is touted as the author of the Torah. In other words, he was the beginning of the Torah. He's touted as the one that finished the Torah, not the Tanakh, the first 5 books. Moshe began and ended that. So he is the beginning and the end of the Torah. Am I right? And so Yeshua is the beginning and the end of the Torah. Isn't that interesting? Both were drawn out of the water, and each likewise became a source of water for Israel. It is my contention, and listen to me carefully, that both died for Israel, with Satan not being able to claim the body of either one. Go back and look at Deuteronomy chapter 34, verse 7, and then look with me in Jude chapter 1, verse 9. Yet Michael the archangel, when contending with the devil, he disputed about the body of Moshe, and he didn't bring a railing accusation against Satan. He only said, Yahweh rebuked you. Now, if Moshe's actions were so reprehensible that it caused him to be banished from the promised land, why would Yahweh want to bother to hide the man's body? I mean, these are questions that beg an answer. Am I the only one that's ever asked these questions? Listen to me. I believe Abba's trying to teach us something about what's happening in the day that you and I are living in. Could the death of Moshe, which of necessity prevented his entrance to the promised land, could it have been a foreshadowing event typifying the coming death of our Messiah? Think about this. Are y'all okay? Does anybody have any nursing training? Maybe you can just check the blood pressure of a couple. The Jordan River, which they're right here in the vicinity of the Jordan River, they can look over to the promised land. It's interesting because this is the spring of the year, and if you read Joshua, the Jordan River overflows its banks. And so we're looking at flooding conditions, and we're going to cross that thing in 11 days. Think about it now. The Jordan River also is known as a dark river. See, there's a contrast in the Hebrew, depending on relationship. The same river, if I cross, takes me into the promised land. If I'm in the promised land and I cross over, I'm going into the wilderness. Can y'all see that? It's a dark river that flows down into the Dead Sea. The transition or translation of Elijah, who is believed to have not died, and it's recorded by Elisha, it also occurs here, right here in the Jordan River. These are not coincidences. Are you listening? There's something about this river where one is translated from life to death, or death to life. There's something about this river that gives you a choice to either enter into the promised land or remain on the side of death. Isn't that interesting? And for emphasis, once again, from our heavenly source, the constellation of signs, the sign of Aquarius the water bearer, I don't know if you've ever noticed this before, but he is depicted as carrying or holding a water pitcher, an urn. And as that water flows out, it falls out into the earth, and in the constellational signs, it forms a river called Eridanus. Listen to that, Eridanus. It's my belief that the constellational river Eridanus also portrays the Jordan River, and that one in the stellar luminaries, is also a demarcation line between death, the wilderness, and life, the promised land. In fact, if you look at that word Eridanus, how it's translated as river of judgment, and it's really eerily similar to the word Yarden, Jordan. Eridanus, Yarden. Jordan can be translated as the descender or river of Dan or Dan judgment. Now, when I'm writing this, I'm sitting here, my head's smoking. It's almost like an outer body experience because I'm thinking, you ain't got the mind to be writing this kind of stuff. So I know it didn't come from me. And so I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, as I'm trying to wrap my head around this, I think that they'll probably be doing the same thing. It seems that Moshe is indeed denied access to the inheritance. However, listen to me carefully. There's a law called the law of sowing and reaping. Yeshua said, except a corn of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it cannot get up and produce again. Is it possible that Moshe instead became a seed just like Yeshua, who was planted for the generations who would cross over and come in the distant future? Could Moshe have been literally planted as a seed, as a precursor to Messiah? Again, if he wasn't, explain to me the Mount of Transfiguration incident. I don't have an answer. I was hoping maybe you would. Pay attention to these similarities. Is this smoking? Two men. As soon as Moshe's finished, two men, Pisces, two houses, Joshua and Caleb. Isn't that interesting? Ephraim and Yehuda, the two houses that are being regathered as we speak. Ezekiel talks about two sticks being gathered together. The two houses, two men follow the same pattern given by Moshe and fulfill that sign of Pisces. And you know what they do next? they lead the nation of Israel to the Jordan in a trial run, depicting the one out of whom the water flows. The Jordan River is a picture of Aquarius, the water bearer, because it's his water urn that flowed down into the earth and causes this Jordan River to become a source of living water. And then they find the place to celebrate Passover, fulfilling exactly what was said in Mark 14 and in Luke 22. Oh, it's strictly an accident. Strictly an accident. I believe Moshe was establishing case precedent. And this would also, once he sets this precedent in motion regarding what had already been written, you had two witnesses come together. When Moshe comes together as a witness of what's written in the stellar luminaries, it is now fact. So let it be said, so let it be written. I'm convinced that what he was doing was establishing how the events would unfold regarding Yeshua, and the heavens would then declare the glory of Elohim, and the firmament would reveal his handiwork to all those that would be able to hear. And so it seems that everything Moshe is setting in order here, he's literally acting out the coming of the Messiah, the water bearer, and his subsequent death, burial, and resurrection. In fact, Yeshua's forebears, Joshua being the son of Nun. Isn't that interesting? Because Nun in Hebrew is fish. Pisces, house of Ephraim, and Caleb, Judah. They literally pantomime, they literally act out the eternal crossing of the river of life that's seen or depicted in the stellar luminaries. And this rehearsal is demonstrated here in this dissertation to them by a prophet like Moshe. Yeshua said there would be a prophet like Moshe come, and it's him. And what's happening is it's showing us how he would cross from death to life and become the first to access the promised land. Do you think maybe, listen to me carefully, we don't have a record of Elijah dying? Well, it does say that Moshe dies. And it says that Yahweh hides the body. But Hasatan can't get to the body, so the body doesn't see corruption. Go back and read Jude chapter 1. That's what it says. This is not I'm just putting this out. These are facts that are there. And so is it possible, since Moshe did die, is it possible that Moshe was also able to experience the power of the resurrection, setting a pattern for Yeshua to come? It's mind-staggering. It's mind-staggering. Joshua and Caleb, the combined houses of Judah and Ephraim, cross over the Jordan into the promised land. I submit to you, listen to me carefully, that it's time now for the combined house of Joseph. And listen, I didn't say houses, because when we come together, we're no longer two separate people. We are echad, we are one. And it's time for the house of Joseph and Ephraim, Judah, to make preparations for our final crossing. See, that's not the end. Crossing the Jordan River was not the end. There's a lot of giants that have to be dispossessed when we get on to the other side. Oh, I'm waiting for my inheritance. Where's the giants you're going to take it from? Oh, somebody's finna to topple over. Say amen right there. Now, I can just smell the skepticism here. I can smell this dripping. If you look around this puddle, all around you, skeptical. I just don't know if I've never heard this before. Moshe died. Ooh. Let's look in Joshua 3:16. I thought, isn't that odd? I mean, we know that some man put these chapters and verses, but this is Joshua 3:16. And when you hear what I'm about to share with you, you'll understand John 3:16. Because they're intertwined together. That the waters which came down from above stood. Wait a minute, did you hear that? Waters which came down from above. The way that this is written, the syntax here indicates that these waters literally were a living entity because they came down. They were able to move. Are you listening to me? Well, sure, a river, the head of a river flows down. Okay, I got you. Just stick with that if that's all you can handle. That the waters which came down from above stood and rose up upon an heap. How in the world is this happening if there's not some kind of supernatural stuff going on behind it? And then it says, very far from the city Adam, that is beside Zeraton, and those that came down, those waters that came down toward the sea of the plain, even the salt sea, they failed. Those waters that came down and thought that they would move, all of a sudden they failed and were cut off. And the children of Israel walk across on dry land. Now think about this. You got to understand that this is referring to a living entity that's getting cut off. This is typology. This is a rehearsal. Something is happening here. Waters indicates seed. So there's words here just you need to look at this. Look at this phrase, which came down. In Hebrew, it's ha-yeradim. The root is the word yerah, the waters which came down. It means to go down, to descend, to be prostrated, to bring down, but it literally indicates to go down for a drink of water. I'm looking at this in the Hebrew language. I know you're probably thinking he was smoking something because I'm not seeing this. But it's saying that these waters came down to get a drink. That's what it's saying in the Hebrew. These waters come down, they descend for a drink. Are you listening? But as they descend for a drink, because of this rehearsal that Moshe is showing Joshua and Caleb, they understand you step into this thing, it divides, and you cut off. Those waters that came down for a drink, they're going to get cut off and fail. Oh, and there's something a little bit different here than just having a dry place to cross over. And it happens that that phrase is the same root as the name of the river Jordan, Yarden, translated as descender, or the one who goes down and becomes the living source of water. Now, you should be able to understand why Yeshua stands up on the last day, the great festival of Sukkot, and he says, if any man thirst, let him come unto me and drink. Wait a minute. Stop right here. The Jordan River represents the man, the Aquarius, the one that was a source of water, the one that you could draw water out of. These waters understand that. They saw it written in the Stellar Luminis. They're going to come down and get a drink. Yeshua says, prophetically, in the future, says, I am the source of water. If you want to live and you're thirsty, you come and you drink. See, this was written in the heavens. This was written in the heavens. The powers that be understand that. If this message had been written in the heavens since creation, is it possible that the enemy would have known the role that this river of life, Eridanus in the heavens, Jordan on the Yerdan on the earth? At least in a figurative sense. However, they might not have understood the spiritual significance nor its analogy that would later be fulfilled in Yeshua. But just suffice it to say that Mount Hermon, which is right there where the headwaters of the Jordan erupt. In fact, at the base of Mount Hermon is a place called Banyas, and that's where Yeshua carries his disciples, and he says, listen, that same headwaters, when it erupts out of the ground, is called gates of hell. And Yeshua carries his disciples and said, listen, the gates of hell shall not prevail against the rock. So he carries them to this very same place called Mount Hermon. And it's at Mount Hermon where the original Nephilim, or the original watchers, predating Genesis chapter 6, literally came down into the earth and began to corrupt the ways of man. Are you listening? They came down, you're right. You think they probably we're going to flip a coin today. Where are we going to go down to today? Oh, it's heads. We're going down to the Euphrates. No, let's flip it again. Best 2 out of 3. Flipped it this time. We're going to go over there to the Mississippi River. You know, there are some today that are saying that this is the new Israel. Have fun with that one. Because that thing, listen to me, that area, that rift is going to split open. And it's going to flood from the Tennessee down. It gets quiet. These individuals picked a location specifically. Do you think it's because they foresaw what was written in the constellations and they expected that it would literally be manifested in the life of a being? At least whatever was written in that heavenly narrative, they understood that there was something regarding this Eridanus and this Jordan that had been rehearsed in an ancient heavenly scroll. Are you listening to me? And is it possible? Think about this. This is mind-staggering. Is it possible that they could have somehow hoped, this blew my mind, that they could have somehow hoped that their own eternal damnation would have been alleviated by immersion into this eternal fountain of youth? Did you hear what I just said? Oh, that's far-fetched. There. That's what the Jordan River emblematic. It was emblematic of a river of life, a transitional period. And it was illustrated in the heavens by the Eridanus and on earth by the Jordan in advance of the coming Aquarius, the water bearer. Or was it perhaps that there was a more sinister effort, that they understood that they were eternally damned, but what they thought they might do is that they would come down and they see this life source flowing, and they thought that they would insert their corrupt fallen seed into this life source, so that as soon as the children of Israel step into this corrupted life source, that they would become just like them. Oh, I don't know if I believe that. Go back and ask Daniel, the prophet to the nations, what's going to happen in the days ahead. Go back and just check on some of your friends that have got some new twitches and having some issues. I'm telling you, we need to learn how to pray and how to pray effectively. Listen, I understand that sometimes we feel compelled or coerced for whatever reason to do certain things, and if you've done, you can repent and you can return and you can detoxify your body from whatever's been put in that. So there is hope. Can I just be real with you? Did y'all know ignorance is curable? Stupid is fatal. Ignorance is curable. Stupid is fatal. You have to understand what I'm sharing with you today. You have to understand that there is a literal, corporeal significance regarding this water source. From the physical realm today, listen to me, all you have to do is just go back and look. The River Jordan today, as we speak, is a literal river of life. It's the most important source of water for Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, Palestine, and Syria. And a lot of people believe that it was a fight over the Jordan River that caused the 6 Days War in 1967. Let's look back at Joshua 3:16. It mentions this city where they cross over and the waters stood up in a heap as being close or not far from the city Adam. Isn't that interesting? Yeshua is known as the last Adam. Adam is one of the Hebrew words for man, Ish, whose value of 311 again connects us back to the 11th month Shabbat, also known as Adar, where our Parsha begins. It says that Adam is followed here in Joshua 3:16 by the mention of a city called Zeratan, translated from the root Zeradah, meaning to pierce or to puncture. And so that also indicates that the waters were parted. Listen, this is mind-staggering again, that the waters were parted and Israel as a nation is about to go inside the pierced Adam. That mind staggers me. In other words, just like Moshe, y'all sang the song during praise and worship, show me the glory. When Moshe asked to see the glory of Yahweh, Yahweh says, you can't see my face. But he said, what I will do, I'm going to place you in the cleft of the rock. The rock was the same water source that's depicted in this Jordan River. I'm going to place you in the pierced place. I'm going to place you in the fissure. I'm going to place you in the crossing place in the Jordan. And when I place you there, I'll put my hand over your face. And then when I go by, you can see my achor. You can see my back parts. The numeric value of Zeratan, 740, is the same as the Hebrew phrase sopheret, which means a writing, something that has been inscribed. And so when he tells him, I'm going to place you in Zeratan, this pierced place, it's indicating that Yeshua not only became the pierced one, but he became the writing. Yeshua became the Devarim. He literally became the fleshly embodiment. He was the literal water picture or container of all the words that were pouring out of Aquarius, the water bearer, depicted in everything in the 12 zodiacal signs in the heavens, literally poured inside him. And I believe not only were they poured inside him, I believe that they were transcribed by the finger of Yahweh in his DNA molecular makeup. And I'll go one further. I believe that upon his crucifixion, the scourging that took place right before it, I believe as they scourged him, and you can argue with me till the cows come home, and you'll never unconvince me. I believe when they scourged him, and if you go back and read it, Isaiah 53 talks about the stripes. That word for stripes is karborah, and it indicates a lateral stripe across your body. I believe that when he was striped across his front and across his back, I believe it was literally lines on a Torah scroll. And when Moshe was put inside the cleft of the rock, he looked at the back of the man as he walked away. I believe Moshe saw Isaiah 61, the Spirit of the Lord's upon me, written in blazes and written by the finger of Yahweh, the blood of the King, for all mankind to see that. Why was it that Moshe, when he was placed in the cleft of the rock, that same water source, why was he able to see the back parts of Yahweh? Man, we just looked at that. I'm going to speed up a little bit. What, is it possible, again, that Moshe saw Isaiah 61? I believe so, because Yeshua quotes it. When does he quote Isaiah 61? He quotes it in Luke 4:18. And you know what happens there? He'd been 40 days in the wilderness. Go figure that one. And one verse says he was driven into the wilderness by the Ruach, and it's immediately after a mikvah. Where did the mikvah occur? It occurs in the Jordan River. A strictly coincidence, just strictly coincidence. Let me just read to you Isaiah 61. I'm not going to read it all because you need to go back and look at it. The Spirit of Adonai Yahweh is upon me, because Yahweh hath anointed me to preach good tidings unto the meek. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted. Man, that ought to encourage you. To proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of prison to them that are bound, to proclaim the acceptable year of Yahweh. The acceptable year of Yahweh is the year of the Jubilee. And here's where it stops. When Yeshua, in Luke chapter 4, Yeshua doesn't finish this part of the quote. And he goes on to say in Isaiah 61, this part is going to be fulfilled in the end days. And the day of vengeance of Elohim, to comfort all those that mourn. Wait a second. Yeshua's going to exact vengeance on the enemies of Elohim in order to comfort those of us that have mourned. That's how it's written. I didn't put that in there. That's how it's written. And so can you see the implications here? Liberty to captives, prisons open, the Jubilee or Yovel being demonstrated, the day of vengeance. And I had to ask a question, vengeance upon whom? He's speaking of the power of the resurrection, releasing those that would be held by death. And so what I've seen here, and hopefully you've been able to see it, is that the Jordan seems to be a physical shadow picture on earth of the living waters, or the Aquarius, the original Adam that's depicted in the heavens. He then, in like manner, will become the source of Israel's water, much like the rock or the well that followed them in the wilderness. And all you have to do is go back to Genesis chapter 3, and you see where the original Adam, who was supposed to be the source of living waters implicating seed, was corrupted, and because of his corruption, all of mankind DNA becomes corrupted by the insertion of the fallen seed and hit into his lineage. But if you go back and understand what was written in the stellar luminaries, there would come of necessity one who would come in that same body as the Adam was in, and because he had no sin in him, the living waters resonating out of him, the living seed issuing out of him would produce a pure stock set of sons who would walk in the earth. Now, Mount Hermon was thought to be the place where the fallen ones, Yerad, are descend into the earth, the Adama, to the Adam. And it's not an accident that they chose this location right here at the headwaters of the Jordan, I believe, in order to try and revisit what happened in Genesis chapter 3 once again. And so if that's the case, it's a powerful typology of Yeshua himself. He literally claims to be this source of heavenly and earthly living water, which was narrated, as I shared with you earlier, during the Feast of Tabernacles or Sukkot, John chapter 7, 37 through 39. And I thought it's interesting that the enemy sought to kill him, not understanding that death could not hold this last Adam because there was no serpent seed in him. And so now, if you go back to Joshua 3:16, it says, the waters from Mount Hermon stood up in a heap. That word heap there is the word ned, nude, nod. It indicates to wander. Cain wanders in this same area, the land of Nod. It indicates to be agitated. Sometimes when you're sitting here in the congregation and I see you back there nodding and I thought you were just sleepy, it's just because you're agitated. That's what it says. You're agitated, disturbed. That's what it says. And it says these waters that are nodding, that they failed and were cut off. But Yeshua, instead of being cut off by his death, he was able to be resurrected out of the earth, and his resurrection cut off and damned forever the seed of the enemy. And again, I'm convinced that you go back and look in Genesis 4:16, you can see that root there, the word nod, nude, ned. They chose this place because it was the source of consternation. They understood it. They had thought to have achieved a victory in Genesis chapter 3 in this same location. And they took the first offspring of the Adam, Cain, and they thought that what they would do was use the seed of Cain to continue to propagate their unholy alliance. Isn't that interesting? And then we're told, Joshua 3:16, that those waters failed. Say amen right there. Tamam. It means finished, to brought to an end, destroyed. These waters are cut off. That means you cut something down, you cut it off, you behead it, you eliminate, and in the process you cut a covenant. Most people don't see it. But in my opinion, this is the single most powerful prophecy regarding the cutting off of the serpent's seed line in the Tanakh, right here. This is a prophetic warning to the house of the serpent. And I want to show you something about Jordan, this miracle river. Can y'all hold on? I've got just a few more slides. I got 8 minutes. Let's go back and review the statement Yeshua makes in Luke chapter 4, verse 18 through 19. The Spirit of Yahweh is upon me because he's anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised, to preach the acceptable year of Yahweh, the Yovel. How can we tie this to our story? There are two notable miracles that no man supposedly had been able to achieve before. You know that he resurrects the dead. He heals all kinds of diseases, but one of those is healing leprosy. Are you hearing me? It was said that when the Messiah comes, the leprous one would be able to heal the leper. Are you listening to me? This is powerful. Again, most people fail to remember that this takes place after his 40 days in the wilderness, and that 40 days began immediately after he was mikvahed in the Jordan. He's mikvahed in the midst of this same river of life. Listen to me carefully. This is not for filler material. While he's in this Jordan River and he's mikvahed, as soon as he comes out of the water, symbolizing death, burial, and resurrection, am I right? Elohim makes the most powerful statement in creation that affects you now. And he says, it was not said before, but until he comes out of the Jordan River, it says, "This is my beloved Son." Why did he use that particular time to say that? Jordan is the river that separates flesh from spirit, death from life. And so when he goes in and he's mikvahed in this Jordan River, just like the children of Israel were mikvahed in the Jordan River, it was typifying. See, all of this has been a rehearsal. It was typifying the redemption plan of Yahweh, that there would come one who would stand up in the face of the accusations of the enemy, have no sin in him, and he would die, he would be killed, and then he would subsequently resurrect. And that was what was being typified. Only then could he be known as the beloved Son, the firstborn of many. Are you hearing me? And so what happens here is it becomes a lawful demonstration of the precedent that had already been set. Moshe was talking about case law. It's written in the stellar luminaries. And so what happens here, before the court of creation, Yeshua willfully submits his life, typifying his death, burial, and later his resurrection. And this becomes what initiates the born again or demonstration of the firstborn of creation, and it generated the above response from Yahweh. This is my beloved Son. Throughout antiquity, you want to argue with me or not, the idea of an immersion or baptism or mikvah has always symbolized death, burial, and resurrection of the ones that's participating. All of Israel is mikvah during the crossing of the Jordan, just like we see here. Just like the previous generation that supposedly were mikvahed in the Red Sea. That generation, this is interesting, because the generation that was mikvahed in the Red Sea, that should have had a quote-unquote born-again experience, rebelled and perished, much to the chagrin of all of those that say, once saved, always saved. There's a whole generation that was not. Say amen. Another benefit, another miraculous characteristic of the River Jordan is that it is the only place mentioned in Scripture where one was cleansed of leprosy by stepping into it. It was a rehearsal. When Elisha tells Naaman to go down and mikvah 7 times into the Jordan River, he can't touch him. Elisha doesn't have the power. Even though Elisha does twice a minute the miracles that Elijah did, Elisha can't heal him. The only one that can heal him is that source of living waters. Now you know why the lepers all came to the Jordan, known as Yeshua. Yeshua was the Eridonus, the river in the heavens. Yeshua was the epitomized in the Jordan River. They came to him, and he did something that was contrary to everything in his day. He touched him, and he was cleansed in the living waters. Wow. It's not an accident in Genesis 13 that Abraham has Lot separated from him right here. Right here at the Jordan River. Lot or lot means a covering, as in a veil, something like a masach, like a mask. See, Lot had to go around with a mask on when everybody thought he was related to Abraham. Call yourself Abraham if you want to. Take that mask off. It indicates that it took a separation, a cutting off of the flesh, Lot, from Abraham. And in the process, Lot chooses the city of the plains. Did you hear what I just said? Lot chooses to go back into the wilderness where that generation dies off. He took the cities of the plain. Abraham decides, I'm going to cross over and go into the land of Canaan. I thought, isn't that interesting? Abraham's a father of the faith. Why? Because Abraham steps across into the Jordan River, into the man called Aquarius, into the river that is the source of life, and he goes in, he's mikvahed, and he comes out, symbolizing a born-again experience, pointing in faith to the coming of the Messiah who would step into the same place. That's why he's called the father of the faith. This is amazing. Abraham was the first man that's recorded that was willing to die to the flesh in a rehearsal. Have you ever thought about the fact that he had a promised seed? Abraham and Sarah both, their bodies were considered dead. And when he's given a promised seed, you know what Abraham does? He goes and attempts and is willing to cut off that promised seed. Again, understanding that his flesh would have been dead, and in order for Yahweh to raise up seed, he's going to have to fulfill what had been shown to him in the stellar luminaries. Go and look out there if you can. And if you can understand that, so shall your seed be. And so Abraham crosses over Jordan, And when he does, listen to me, this is again mind-staggering. Genesis 13 is right before Genesis 14. The Melchizedek encounter. And it paved the way. By him being obedient, it paves the way for Abraham to step into the role of a resurrected son, into a king and priest position. And he steps into there. When he resurrects out of the Jordan River, he is now king and priest in the earth. And he has that confirmed when Melchizedek follows it and transfers that to him. When Yeshua's standing there, Yochanan anoints him. Yeshua comes up, and there's a transference of that king and priestly role in the form of the Melchizedek priesthood. Same thing. Same thing. This is powerful. Following this sequence that I've delineated here, Yeshua becomes the only one who, instead of instructing the leper to go cleanse in the Jordan, he touches him, demonstrating the fact that he is the only one that is the source of the living waters that's capable of healing. Why is healing leprosy so significant? Need to hear me. Did you know that leprosy is coming back? Did you know that there's one place still in the contiguous United States where there's a leper colony? Or at least the last time I researched it. So in Louisiana. Leprosy is a disease that is associated with lashon hara, an evil tongue or dead seed. Words are the seed of creation. And so the reason that you find Moshe, listen to me, this is again mind-staggering. When Moshe has his hand turned leprous and Yahweh then heals that hand, you notice that he doesn't go in front of Moshe and demonstrate that miracle. The healing of that leper's hand was not for the benefit of Pharaoh, it was for the benefit of the children of Israel, so that they could see that Moshe was acting in the stead of the one who would come, whose words had the ability, the living words, not dead words, not contrived seed from the house of the enemy or the house of Pharaoh, but this living one would have the ability to speak words that would heal and change the lives of people coming. That's why Moshe was one who was considered the beginning and the end of the Torah. How does this affect us? Masses of humanity have been already raped worldwide. The pandemic that we all experienced was nothing more than a genocidal effort to eliminate the pure stock of the house of Israel. Listen to me, the waters are coming down, and they're going to attempt. Go back and read Revelation chapter 12, when the enemy realizes that he has been cast down to the earth again. It says that he is wroth. He's mad because he realizes that he has a short time. He knows there's 11 days. They're going over there in 11 days. We got to get this job taken care of. There's only an 11-day journey to this same crossing spot in Jordan. Only those sons of Elohim will cross. The plagues have already begun, and listen to me carefully. Your assignment, should you choose to accept it, is to guard yourself, spirit, soul, and body, from anything that would compromise your DNA. Learn how to literally and spiritually detoxify your body from any foreign genetic material. That includes your closely held traditions. And I'm finishing with this. This touched my spirit. Revelation 22:17. And the Spirit and the bride say, come. Let him that hears say, come. Let him that is athirst say, come. And whosoever will, let him take this water of life freely. I hope that you've understood what I've shared with you this afternoon. And I pray that you let these words resonate inside your spirit, man, and you do what you need to do to go back and weigh them out against Yahweh's word. Don't take my word for it. Your truth will stand scrutiny. And it's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to be challenged, and it's okay to be stretched. I'm going to share this with you, and then I'm quitting. You would not be where you are right now if you hadn't been wrong in the past. Being wrong isn't a failure. Choosing to not do something about it and learning how to be right and accept the truth is where you fail. Abba has plans for you. Jeremiah 29:11, I have plans for you, plans for good and not for evil, to bring you to an expected destination. Shabbat shalom.
Hallelujah.